And the podcast I produce at VMware, which is the CIO Exchange podcast, I wanted to be looked to as a leading voice in the conversation for all the different things that are important to technology leaders at large companies. So whether that's from security, whether that's from multi-cloud optimization, whether that's the next generation conversations in AI and ML, I wanted the podcast to be seen as something that was leading in the industry and delivering it in a way that can help me then communicate that to the other people on my team. In my role at VMware, it's important to start with two questions, which is anytime I do something, I ask, who's it for and what's it for? Now, when it comes to the podcast, the really important answers to those questions was, well, what do I want to do for the individual who is consuming this? Rather than in some marketing situations, they might say, look, I've got a marketing problem and I need to use the audience to solve my problem. But my approach really is, well, how can I use marketing to solve their problem? And when I'm asking those questions, who's it for and what's it for, I'm trying to take that approach of, okay, who's it for? My audience is the office of the CIO, executive technology leaders all around the world. We have 3 different regions that cover the entire globe, and I need to create something that's for them. Okay, well, what is it for? When I'm doing something for them, I want to help them make progress. I want to actually generally create something that helps them think differently, act differently, potentially have resources, a trusted resource that they can then go and help inform future decisions. And so what I've accomplished, I feel like, when partnering with Caspian in this effort to help these technology leaders make progress, I feel like I've accomplished that connection of trust. And for me, that is really deepening relationships with the individuals who are consuming the podcast. So if they're consuming one podcast and then becoming a subscriber and then listening episode over episode, that's a huge win for me, especially if I'm finding the right person in the right role at the right time, giving them the right information. That's a massive win. And so subscribers, of course, have gone up tremendously. I like to tell people the story from an accomplishment standpoint. The first 100,000 downloads took me 3 years. So this doesn't happen overnight. But I have to say, when I started partnering with Caspian, the next 100,000 downloads took 5 months. I have to say, one of the greatest things that Caspian has helped me do is they helped me win a Webby award. Totally surprised. The CIO Exchange podcast won a Webby award for best technology podcast, not best technology podcast at a B2B software company about X, Y, and Z. No, just best technology podcast overall. And with that value, it's much easier for me to help a sales rep, for example, build a relationship with a new CIO at this Fortune 100 company, because I can say, come on this podcast, this award-winning podcast, tell your story, and now your success will be elevated. It's not about product. It's not about our company. It's about you and your success. The content that I've helped create was one step in closing an 8-figure deal for a product. Now, it wasn't the only factor, but it was a positive customer experience that created that value. So now the ROI for that is just massive. If you're talking about the cost of a podcast and the ability to influence pipeline that then results in an 8-figure deal, I'm sorry, but that's a no-brainer. That's very easy for me to articulate.